So I did something recently that a lot of other people did as well, which is I flew on an airplane. And nothing particularly out of the ordinary happened, but the experience really just, and it wasn't the first time I've flown on an airplane. It hopefully won't be the last time I fly on an airplane. But every time I do it, I just am so preoccupied by the sheer absurdity of the misery that is inflicted upon us every time that we want to fly on an airplane. And there are many, many reasons why. One of them is a insatiable desire on behalf of corporations to see just how miserable they can make us before we riot in the streets. And apparently that line is pretty fucking far down the end zone, right? Apparently we're not anywhere near it. And I wonder sometimes if we will ever get to that point. They're just going to keep pushing us and pushing us and pushing us farther, making the seats smaller, right? Making the fee for the bag bigger, right? Until something gives way. Until either, like I said, we all riot in the streets, or until the government sanctions them, which is another thing that's never going to happen because the government can't even agree on fucking daylight savings time. The simplest possible thing. I'll tell you what really, really, really made me realize that nothing of material value will ever change in America. It was the daylight savings time bill recently. Everybody agrees that daylight savings time is stupid and shouldn't happen. There's no reason in our modern society why it should happen. If there is anything that we can all agree on, it is daylight savings time. And yet, all attempts for the government to get rid of daylight savings time have completely stalled out and got no momentum whatsoever. Not because of a lack of support. We all support it. Because of lobbyists paying the government because they want to keep daylight savings time because that means that we'll go shopping. Nothing will ever change. And I'll tell you what, that made me very, very cynical. But I'm not even here to talk about daylight savings time. That's a totally separate conversation. Really, I suppose, that I totally understand, right, why we are all so sort of jumpy regarding air travel after the September situation, But if you think about it, right, what are the odds that they're going to try to do the same thing again? Very, very little. I mean, it would just be stupid because the whole reason why they decided to do the September situation the way that they did in the first place, and I was not on the board of directors, so I don't know specifically what was going through their minds at the time, but I would assume that the reason why they decided to do the September situation in the way that they did was because they recognized a vulnerability in our society that we were not even thinking about, right? And they realized that they could use it to inflict a large-scale harm upon our society. So if there's going to be another incident like that, it is going to be in a way that we never would have seen coming. It is going to be something that nobody could have ever predicted. And it is going to inflict large-scale harm upon us in a way that we did not think was possible beforehand. Because that's the reason why the September situation happened the way that it did in the first place. Well, I mean, I guess you could get into the other argument, which is how much was it allowed to happen by certain forces. I don't know. I do think a lot of that argument is overblown as well, but I just think there's certainly a lot going on around that. And it's so interesting to me that now we basically, every time we fly, we have to go through this whole community theater production of the safest airplane ride in America, right? That really doesn't make any sense. So you get in the airport, right away, the logic completely disintegrates. Because look, guys, not me, but if they wanted to do something, why wouldn't they just do it to the security line? Do you see what I'm trying to say here? Why don't they just bomb the security line? Does that not occur to anybody? Why don't they bomb the highway outside of the airport where everybody's sitting in their car? They could do anything. So why all of a sudden, magically, does the terrorism line start about 20 feet into the airport? So, right away, I've already dismantled the entire reason why the TSA should exist, okay? So then we have to get in the line. And sometimes they make us take our shoes off, but sometimes we can keep our shoes on. Why? I don't know. Is there sometimes a bomb in people's shoes? Sometimes, depending on what the weather is that day? Sometimes we have to take our belts off. Sometimes we have to take our computers out of the backpack. But sometimes we don't. And so half the time, they get mad at me for when I start to take my belt off and I take my shoes off and I put the laptop in the thing, they yell at me and they say, "Stop it!" And I say, "What?" And they say, "You're not supposed to do that. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to take your belt off." And I said, "Well, the last time you said that I did have to take my shoes off and my belt off, and you yelled at me for not doing it. You yelled at me and you said, 'Take your shoes off and your belt off.' You stupid fucking moron." Why? How am I supposed to know that? If you're not supposed to take your shoes off, put a big sign that says, "Today you don't have to take your shoes off, everybody. Today you can leave them on." I know why they don't. Because the people who join the TSA, all right, you know what? I'm sorry, I got to be really careful because frankly, I'll be honest with you, being a social media influencer has made me realize that we live in a fucking police state where you cannot say anything. You do not have freedom of speech. You don't. Because you can, and I'm not trying to say that in a right-wing sort of way, but the truth is, freedom of, oh God, that's a whole other thing. This video is not about freedom of speech, okay? I'm in the security line, and I take my shoes off and my belt off, and I take my laptop out of the stupid thing. So, again, sometimes you have to put all your stuff in the same box. Sometimes you have to make sure that everything is in a different box, based on no logic that anybody could foreseeably understand ahead of time. And then they act like you're the biggest moron for not doing that. So I don't even remember what it was this time. I did whatever the hell it was before, but that they told me to do in the line. Then you go into you put all your stuff on the stupid conveyor belt. And then you go into the big machine that does nothing. You stand like this. You put they say, "Come in." You put your hands up like this so that they can get you used to the idea of being obedient. And then it's, and I will admit, it's very impressive. It's very cool. The big machine that makes you feel safe. They spend a lot of money on that fancy looking machine that goes ring all around. That does nothing. It does not do anything. Have you ever thought about the fact that machine does absolutely fucking nothing? And I will prove to you why it does nothing. Because I wear the same shorts every day of my entire life. Because when I get a pair of shorts, cargo shorts usually, I really like those shorts. I wear the same exact shorts. I wear the same exact kind of underwear. I wear the same exact belt. And I have for 20 years. every single day of my life. That is not an exaggeration. And I have flown on an airplane many, many times intermittently throughout those years. Every time I go through the machine, it highlights a completely different part of my body. So again, remember, nothing has changed any of these times. The scientific method is an experiment that you can replicate, right? So what makes something a scientific truth is if you can create under the exact same conditions a scenario that replicates itself over and over and over and over and over again, the same way. The reason why I know for a fact the machine does not do anything is because I have walked through it probably 30 times in my life, wearing the exact same shorts, wearing the exact same no belt or belt, whatever it is that day, right? Wearing one of the exact same 5 t-shirts that I own, with nothing in my pockets, because you're never allowed to have anything in your pockets. You know, I have pretty much been the same weight my entire life. You know, well, obviously not the, what I'm trying to say is that my frame has been the same. It's not like I grew an extra appendage coming out of my thigh, right? All of the conditions have been the exact same every single time that I go through the magic machine. This time, for some reason, I stepped out of the machine and he said, stop right there, take a look at the machine. And I took a look at the machine and there was a giant red glowing orb around my dick and balls. And I said, what am I supposed to be looking at here? And he said, you see that? And I said, yeah, that's my crotch. And he said, well, it says that there's something there. And I was like, obviously there's something there. If you took 5th grade anatomy, yes. I didn't say this because listen, when you're in that situation with the TSA or the cops or whatever, just say whatever you need to do to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. So I was like, okay, whatever, good. Do whatever you have to do now, okay? So he said, I have to pat down your groin. And I said, why? And he said, because the machine told us that there's something there. And he said, would you like to go into a private screening room, or would you like to have this done right here in front of everyone? And he made sure to emphasize, I have to grab your balls. For some reason. So I said, you know what? Sure. Fine. And he said, so does that mean that you want a screening room, or does that mean you don't want a screening room? And I said, I don't want a screening room. Just do whatever you have to do right here. Just get it the fuck over with so I can get on the airplane. So he makes sure to draw, I guess, you know, honestly, the whole thing was just completely ridiculous because I could tell the entire time that he was trying to be overly cautious, right? Because grabbing someone's genitals is a very, very bad thing to do if you are not a person who has been explicitly told to do it by the person, right? So he was going into painstaking detail, and he was trying to be as, you know, he was trying to be as clinical as possible about it, but at the same time, he said, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to put my hands up your thighs and brush around your groin. Then, and so he said, can I do that? And so I said, fine. And he did whatever it was. And he said, the next thing that I have to do is I have to, basically the non-clinical version of what he said was, I have to feel your dick and balls. I have to grab your dick and balls. I have to rub my hand around your dick and balls, and I have to squeeze your dick and balls. Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that? What does the magic machine tell you is there? There's nothing in my pockets. Why the hell would anybody, again, if a terrorist wanted If I wanted to do something, I would have done it by now. Do you understand? If I had a bomb in my balls, I could have set it off right then. Before I went through the magic machine, before you grabbed my dick and said there's not a bomb in here. And again, I'm not saying that I'm going to do that. I'm just saying the logic doesn't make sense. Fundamentally, on a fundamental level. Even if you don't get into, political theory, even if you don't get into the psychology of power dynamics and the fucking Constitution, the simple logic doesn't make sense. And that's it. That's all, he did what he had to do. He made it a whole drawn out thing. And then I got to, after the public humiliation, I got to go and get on my plane. But it's just, if you put the slightest amount of critical thought into it, it makes zero sense. And honestly, that's the case with most of the things in our society. The thing is that people don't do that. Everybody goes through the TSA security line because they need to get somewhere. They are willing to be sexually harassed because they just want to get to Kansas City, right? That's all. So we put up with it, even though it doesn't make sense. And we will forever and ever until the end of time. Until we are all burning in the streets. Because we just wanted to get to Kansas City. Just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. So, fine. Go through the magic machine. Grope me.